and North Florida TPO.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, should concealed firearms be prohibited at City Hall? Most say yes, and it's just one question Duval County voters were asked to weigh in on in a new University of North Florida public opinion poll. We'll discuss that and the answers, the approval ratings of several public officials, and opinions about taxes with a UNF poli-sci professor. Later in the program, what the state and national retreat from fluoride treatments means for the future of our dental health. But first, a poll released this morning surprised many with a stark shift in residents' stated priorities, with 76% of people polled claiming that City Hall should be one of the places in which concealed weapons are prohibited. Here to help us break it down is Sean Frieder. He's an assistant professor of political science at the University of North Florida. Welcome back, Sean.
Always good to be here.
So I want to start with the first question that this poll asked for residents to rate their poll asked 742 registered voters to weigh in. It was evenly split pretty much between Republicans and Democrats, and independents also being polled. This showed a big swing in priorities. Tell us what won out.
Yeah, so for the last couple times we've run this, crime has been the big issue on voters' minds. This time, it was almost a flip of what we'd seen before. Crime and the economy are always at the top of people's minds when you do these what's most important questions. But this time, economy was the big winner, so to speak, particularly housing costs. But you can also throw in people, when prompted, talked about economy generally, inflation, property taxes were also talked about. That's probably a pretty significant shift in the economy.
So this poll found that 25% of people, a quarter of those polled, said that housing costs were the biggest problem facing the city. Crime just 12%. And as you said, that's a flip because the last time this poll asked that question in 2023, 36%, more than a third, said crime was the biggest issue. And you say generally the economy is concerning people, but the fact that it was specific to housing costs, is that surprising?
It's not. I mean, if it's a large cost for people. For people, it's going to be by far their biggest cost, and it's also a market where there's a lot of uncertainty right now. Any number of the inputs that go into new houses that is affected by tariffs at the national level. Obviously, homeowners insurance, things that have been issues at the state level, have been issues for a while. Those have continued to persist. Locally, there's been a number of issues with housing shortages, especially for low-income individuals, private companies coming in. So there's a lot that's hitting housing specifically, but again, the economy is going to be at the top of mind. At the top of mind of economy is always going to be housing.
So what about crime? And we know that the homicide rate in Jacksonville has dropped dramatically in the last year, and everybody's, very pleased with that. Does this response that just 12% put it as the most important problem facing Jacksonville indicate a perception of that decline, or do you think people are just thinking about crime less?
It's probably a little bit of both. I mean, I'm somewhat skeptical that this is overwhelmingly a reaction to the lowered crime numbers. It would be very rational for people to be somewhat less concerned about crime. As you said, crime numbers have gone down. Homicide rates are at some of their lowest levels in decades. So that's going to be reflected in the polling. At the same time, though, we pretty regularly find in political science polling that people are way more concerned about crime than maybe the numbers would lead them to be. So, I wouldn't say all of this decline is because of reality. I think a lot of the time, in order to get that real decline in concern about crime, you need something to distract people in a big way. And that would, again, be the economy, prices, housing, et cetera.
Yeah. I want to ask you because two issues that people really didn't seem to prioritize in this: immigration, which 2% placed as their biggest priority, and taxes, which 1% placed as their biggest priority. And I think it's interesting just because those are two issues that really consumed our legislative
Right.
session in Tallahassee this year. Immigration and taxes were basically the two main priorities and focuses.
Now, some of this, again, might be people being somewhat realistic about the role of local government versus state or federal government. On immigration, local government is going to play a smaller role, despite the dust-ups that may have happened recently in immigration and City Hall. So people are going to be, less concerned about those issues at a local level. At the same time, I think that this reflects, why are politicians going after issues that people might be ranking lower? There are some differences across party lines. Republicans are more concerned indeed about both immigration and property taxes. They are especially likely to talk about property taxes as an issue that concerns them. So I think some of what we're seeing here is maybe not a play for the broader audience, but politicians, state and local, playing broadly for their base, trying to capitalize off of what's going on at the federal level.
If you're just joining us, we are talking to political science professor Sean Frieder about the results of UNF's latest Public Opinion Research Lab poll. You can join the conversation by giving us a call at 904-549-2937 or emailing us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. We've got a call from Stan in downtown. Good morning, Stan. Go ahead.
Hello, Ann,
Good
and
morning.
everybody, and the guests. Our research show, I'm with the African American Economic Recovery Think Tank. Our research show, you have a leadership problem going back over 60 years in Jacksonville. But we talks about everything, and it has an impact. It has an impact on everything in Jacksonville. You have a leadership problem, especially since the pork chop gang has been running Jacksonville. Uh, and we fail to talk about that. The main issue with Jacksonville and why it's not progressing forward overall is leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanley. Appreciate it. Of course, the pork chop gang dates to the 50s in Florida. Very powerful kind of Democrats from this area. Um, so a little bit of a reference throwback there. But what do you think about that? I mean, does this? Uh, oh, we should talk about the approval ratings, I
Yeah,
guess,
it
of
leads
folks.
well
I
into
mean,
the approval ratings we
yeah,
found. Yeah.
yeah, because as usual, the lab does ask about how local officials are doing in their job, and there wasn't a lot of movement in those numbers when we were asked about the mayor, the state attorney, and the sheriff.
Yeah, fairly stable year to year, fairly stable specifically for individuals. City council fares differently. 3% approval ratings, which, in a time like this are actually fairly positive numbers. The fact that Deegan's a couple years in and her numbers really have not shifted much, they're still in the low 60s. That's a very good sign for her. City Hall, on the other hand, City Council is more underwater. There was a 53% disapprove, 42% approve for them. So I think there's a couple factors going on there. It hurts to be a non-named figure. People think of a collective body as easier to be upset with than maybe someone that they can think of their face and what their voice sounds like. But some of it might also have to do with the political dust-ups that have happened between the mayor's office and city council.
Yeah, the city council, though, I mean, I think you're right, as a collective, and sometimes just people shaking their fist at City Hall sometimes doesn't fare as well in these polls. But I went back to the 2023 poll, and at that time, 30% expressed disapproval of the council. This year, 53,
Yeah.
which does seem to be a real bit of movement.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is probably an indication that, at least some people are paying attention to what's happening in local news. There's been various issues recently, some having to do with, as we'll talk about in a second, the issue of the gun registry in City Hall, some having to do with differences on immigration policy, other things there that voters seem to be responding to. And if they're taking a side, they seem to be taking Deegan's side on that. It's also true that as national disapproval increases for other higher offices like presidency. You're going to start to see that at the local level as well. Although, interestingly, for city council, even though it's overwhelmingly Republican, Republicans were upset with city council. Democrats actually had higher approval ratings for city council than Republicans did, which kind of is a head scratcher.
Yeah. So the question of City Hall and security there is something that has been in the news. You just kind of mentioned. So I do want to get to that. Um, People in this poll were asked whether concealed weapons should be banned from City Hall, and they were reminded in that question that they are currently banned from the state attorney's office. They are currently banned from the Jacksonville sheriff's office, and the question was whether they should be also banned at City Hall. What was the response?
Overwhelming support for the ban in public offices like that. This wasn't really a partisan issue. There were differences between Democrats, Republicans, and Independents. Democrats and Independents were more likely to support that, but even amongst Republicans, it was over two-thirds that supported the ban. This is really similar to what we see when we ask detailed questions about gun policy generally. Symbolically, Republicans and Democrats differ strongly on gun policy. When it comes to specific things like bans here or there, registries, et cetera, they're a lot closer together, and Republicans often support a lot of those measures.
Yeah, and so overall, 76% said yes, these weapons should concealed, handguns, weapons should be banned at City Hall. But as you say, 68% of Republicans said that, and obviously a lot more sort of a vocal Second Amendment support typically, accord to Republicans.
Yeah, I mean, again, if we'd asked them, do you support your Second Amendment rights? We would see, again, first with Democrats and Republicans alike, they would say that they support them. Republicans, we'd see more full throated in that. But again, when you go into questions of carry and conceal, which we've pulled on before, Republicans are less supportive of that than I think maybe some of the representatives in office might think that they are, or the public might think. Generally, across the board, most people, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, support what we might call common sense gun reform measures.
Yeah. And so this was one of several, or, a handful of questions that were kind of topical that were asked in this poll. One of them, I was interested in the response to the question about whether there should be more autonomy for the beaches communities.
Yeah.
So the question, and I'm not sure what, made this rise to the level that the poll chose to ask about it exactly, but the question was whether people support or oppose Jacksonville Beach, Neptune Beach, and Atlantic Beach from forming their own county, separate from Duval County. This is an issue that periodically percolates to the surface in the beaches area. But is there something current about it that is prompting this question? And what was the response?
I mean, this is one that we throw on the poll every once in a while to see where the mood is on this. I mean, we have, compared to other cities, this very complicated arrangement in terms of structure between the county at large, the beaches operating semi-autonomously, but not fully autonomously. So this is a check-in question, and it was a complete dead heat. 48% said they approve. 48% said they oppose, but I think the real story is probably buried in the geographic numbers. If you separate out by House district, the beaches are not the place where this is popular. They were much less likely to support this. I think it was about 46, 43% in the beaches. It's more the outlying areas, deep west, deep north Jacksonville, and the urban core that were more in support. So there seems to be more the city saying beaches get away from us rather than the beaches saying the opposite.
It's interesting because I know that, there have been, as I said, periodic initiatives to try to come up with an idea for secession. And the last big one that really, I think, nearly led to a referendum and didn't quite get there, but it was being discussed, was like in 1993 when Ocean County was going to be
Right.
the name of this, joint municipality government. And at the time, all of the enthusiasm was at the beaches because they said we're paying taxes, we're not getting, adequate services for what we're paying, and we don't really have that much in common with the city of Jacksonville. But in this case, it is the opposite. It's now people who are kind of within the entrenched in the city saying maybe we don't need them.
That's right. I mean, I think that this crashes into the shores of reality every few decades. Culturally, there's a reason to think maybe the beaches and the city are kind of separate entities, but I think that both sides realize that one separating the two is fraught with peril. That can be difficult to restructure an entire municipal
Right.
county organization. But
Especially if they have to, build their own jail and
there
their
you
own,
go.
yeah.
Right. And then you have the infrastructure concerns, figuring out new ways to make up shortfalls on both sides from people leaving. So, it's a marriage where I think they realize it's best to stick together in most cases.
Right. So there is another topic that was asked, and that was eliminating property taxes in Florida. That is something that, has been a topic of discussion at the legislative level in Tallahassee. A lot of discussions. Should we get rid of property taxes? That would have a big impact on local governments. Can you kind of catch us up on why that is a topic that what UNF was interested in asking about?
Yeah, I mean, property tax makes up a gigantic percentage of local revenue, nearly half, and that was something that we reminded voters of before asking them in the survey. When we asked them what they thought about continuing property tax or eliminating it, it was a 60% to 40% margin in favor of getting rid of property taxes. Now, I think this comes with a giant political science caveat, which is anytime we ask anyone about cutting taxes, the response is, sure, that's great. I mean, most voters think about that as, are you asking me if I'd like to have more money? And the answer to that question is generally going to be yes. But we find that when they are asked that question, they're not necessarily thinking about what's going to happen to spending as a result of that cuts, or what might happen to the deficit or debt for your local, state, national areas. So if we were to prompt them, my guess is afterward with a couple more questions of, would you like to see local spending go up on various things? They would say yes. Would you like to see local deficits and debts reduced? They would say yes. And you can't do all three of these things at once. So I say I would take this with a grain of salt. If you push harder on voters, I don't think they're nearly as pro tax cuts as they might seem like they are here. But if you just ask them a straightforward question, they'll give you a straightforward response, and
Yeah,
that's yes.
I was actually curious about the verbiage used, and we know that, polling questions and the way that they're formulated can be really important in terms of how they're answered. And so the way this was phrased was last year, Duval County collected 42% of its revenue from property taxes. Do you support or oppose eliminating property taxes? And I wondered if there was a way to formulate that question that was perhaps more to the point of, if the city of Jacksonville had to cut its budget by 42%, would you favor, um, eliminating property taxes?
It would make a big difference. Yeah. I mean, you usually have to make what we call the trade off very apparent to the person when you ask the question. So if we'd asked them that way, there's no doubt in my mind, answers shift a little bit there. This is a straightforward way to ask it. And it's a way to remind people that, this is a substantial percentage of our tax revenue. The other piece of language that's interesting there is we tried to push them pretty hard. We didn't say reduce property taxes, we said eliminate them, which would be a huge move. So,
Right.
this is people responding to even a pretty dramatic version of this in a positive way. But again, if you ask the question, as you said, reminding people that this might lead to huge budget shortfalls, I think their answer changes pretty quickly.
Do you think that the results of these polls are heard on high? I mean, when we talk about things like, people's priorities, do you think that that's something that local leaders or even state leaders take into account when they're moving forward with their messaging and their priorities?
Some do, some don't. I think to a certain extent at the state level, you've got a Republican supermajority in the state. You've had that for a long time now. So I think their concern in being ultra responsive might be lower at the local level. It's somewhat more balanced. So I guess if I saw these polling results, if I was on the city council, it would make me raise an eyebrow about maybe how I have to change what I might be doing. At the same time, it's also difficult to interpret these. We didn't ask individual questions about this council member or this particular person and their constituents' response to it. So it still may very well be the case, as it is with Congress, that people don't like the entity, but they're perfectly happy with their incumbent. So it can also be hard for them to interpret, I think.
Yeah, although getting to the name level in those races and those in city council, very often you find people don't know who those
Simply
people
don't know.
are.
That's most common in local polling.
Yeah. So can you just talk a little bit about the challenges of polling? I mean, we hear nowadays, first of all, cell phones added a whole layer of
Yeah.
complexity, but then just people's willingness to participate in polls in the last several years has also become a really big roadblock.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, the willingness to participate, which has dropped off, and it's been dropping for a long time for all sorts of reasons you can imagine. I mean, if you think of the last time you picked up your cell phone and answered a call from a stranger, it's less likely than it was a few decades ago. That's more expensive for us, just that less people want to talk to us. It just means we have to spend longer collecting data. The thing that really is difficult for us is the partisan divide in who wants to talk to us. Republicans a lot less likely over the last several years to want to talk to us, and that's led to some of the challenges in polling where Republican support for those candidates has been underestimated. So, I could take and live with the people wanting to talk to us less. It's that differential that makes it so much harder to predict what these results are, but it's somewhat easier, I think, at the local level.
And I mean, do we know what that is predicated on? Is that just kind of a general mistrust or misapprehension of the motives of pollsters?
I don't think I've seen an exact answer to it, but my number one item at the top of my head would be maybe a greater distrust towards science amongst Republicans and Democrats, which we do see borne out consistently in polling. I think that that's part of it.
Yeah. Um, just to the question of, the relative importance of local polling like this. Most of the polling that we see is national or statewide, and it usually revolves around
Yeah.
elections. It's not the kind of thing where we're typically hearing polling information other than what the Public Opinion Research Lab does. I mean, could you just kind of talk about what role it plays?
Yeah, I mean, we love to do these kinds of polls specifically focused on local issues because they're unfortunately fairly rare. I think people probably have the preconceived notion that polling, for local level constituents on even for members of the House and in Congress must happen all the time, and it really doesn't. So, you don't get to take those little micro snapshots nearly as much as you'd like to. We're really excited to be able to do these kinds of things because, again, who's going to look at the city of Jacksonville in terms of polling. It's not going to be a large national center. It's going to be something here at University of North Florida, the Public Opinion Research Lab.
Yeah, we do have a comment from Tom on Facebook just saying that the problem is not property tax, it is low wages and added fees. Um, any thought about just kind of, the nuance of where people put the responsibility for the economy and how they experience it?
That's right. I mean, they had so many different ways that they could have talked about their problems that I think people express the economy in different ways. I
Mhm.
think we see it in the polling. Democrats are more likely to talk about the economy, as your caller just did, in terms of wages, issues on sort of the business side of things. Republicans are more likely to talk about it in the problem of the government getting in the way of higher taxes. And so there's a huge differential of people, Democrats really not talking about property taxes at all, Republicans ranking it somewhat higher.
And we should say out of the 15 things that they were asked specifically about, insurance rates were not one of them.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, I think it's sort of wrapped into housing costs. If
Mhm.
we had broken that down, I think housing splits off and we get a little bit of extra for insurance rates.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sean Frieder, very interesting results from this poll. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Up next, we ask a dental expert about the oral implications of state and federal officials' retreat from the use of fluoride. Welcome back. Just 10 years ago, it was hailed as one of the greatest public health achievements of the last century by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Now, adding fluoride to public water systems is banned in Florida and being targeted by many other states as a health concern. Here to tell us about what's changed and the implications for your dental health is Dr. James Rutkowski, director of the Comprehensive Oral Implantation Program at JU. Dr. Rutkowski, thank you so much for joining us by video.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
It is a pleasure to talk to you. You've taught medicine now for many years. You've practiced clinical dentistry for 44 years. Are you surprised to see this change in attitude towards fluoride?
Um, by the general population, yes. The science has always been there. It's been a well accepted fact for 80 years that fluoride at the proper dose is effective in preventing tooth decay. Dentistry is probably been the leader of all medical specialties in prevention. We've helped them through prevention, helped improve the oral health of all patients by the use of fluoride. And so now for us to be considering or actually having taken it out of the water supply is a huge setback for us.
So we know that fluoride does strengthen teeth. It reduces cavities. I believe that it's credited with reducing tooth decay. This added fluoride by 25%.
Yes.
So what do you hear from your colleagues and people in the professional dentistry realm when they see this pullback happening? Is there an understanding as to why it's happening?
Well, it's shocking to all of us, or the vast majority of us, uh, because we are really there to help prevent disease. That's what the dentist is there to do, is to prevent disease, not necessarily to treat disease, not to do fillings, crowns, root canals, extractions, dental implants. We're there to help provide good oral health, and when there's a downfall, to repair those problems. But with the loss of this fluoride, it is going to increase the workload of restorative dentistry, and it's going to lead to more severe complications with teeth that are more severely decayed, patients having what we call soft teeth. And I've heard lots of patients say that have been in areas where they didn't have fluoridated water. Doc, I have soft teeth, and so my fillings don't work, my crowns don't work, my root canals don't work, and I get an extraction. So by having the fluoride in the water, we help prevent all those things. But now it's just going to open up the floodgates and increase all those problems for us. The vast majority of the dentists do not want this, even though you would think that intuitively, well, this is good for dentistry because it's going to give them more work. That's not what we're there for. We're there to do the work of prevention. And dentistry has been very effective in preventing.
I know that the Journal of the American Medical Association tried to assess the potential costs of pulling back from fluoridated water and the use of some fluoride supplements. And their research showed that it could lead to 25 million additional cavities, which seems like a really striking number. And that children, ages 0 to 19 would get, abundantly more of those cavities, but that it would also cost the country nearly $10 billion in terms of additional costs. And you were kind of getting into that. What are some of the ways that that could financially cost individuals or communities?
Well, the optimal time to give fluoride is probably from 3 months. To get fluoride is from 3 months of age, and even in utero, it certainly is helpful, but 3 months of age to the age of 8. That is the most effective time because that's when the enamel of the teeth are developing for you. And it's important that we get it topically, meaning through toothpaste, fluoride treatments at the dentist, but then also internally where we take them, drink the water. It is absorbed in the gut, carried through the blood supply to the teeth and mineralizing the teeth from the inside, making them harder. So if we go ahead and take that fluoride out in that time span for these individuals, we find that those that don't get the fluoride at that age are more apt to lose their teeth, all of their teeth, by the age 50, which now requires that they either have dentures or if they want something that's more stable than dentures, that they get dental implants. So these costs are quite high for people. And even if they just lose 1 or 2 teeth due to being soft and crumbling or breaking off at the gum line, and you need to get a dental implant or a fixed bridge, those are expensive dental treatments. And yes, dentists are very good at doing those things. They'd like to do those things, but we don't want to do them any more than we absolutely have to do them. And by taking the fluoride out of the water, we will have far more decay. When I was in clinical practice, those that came to me from the farms where they had well water, and some well water does have fluoride in it, some well water has too much fluoride in it. Many well water supplies don't have any fluoride at all or very low levels of it. But those that came from areas of low fluoride had far more tooth decay, what we called rampant tooth decay, where it was throughout the mouth, as opposed to those that were in the city where they had a fluoridated water supply. Now, this does not negate the need for good oral hygiene.
I'm shocked to hear you say, to discuss the idea of someone losing all of their teeth by age 50. I mean, I think most of us, when we think about the impacts of fluoride or not having fluoride, is like a couple of cavities.
No, no, we're talking rampant tooth decay, especially in the younger population that will have no exposure to it whatsoever. That's who will be most susceptible to it. Now, if they were to practice excellent oral hygiene, go to the dentist routinely, get fluoride treatments, but all those things cost money, and not everybody avails themselves of that or has the money to do those things or the dedication to practice good oral hygiene. The act of prevention is the way to do it. Those that lose their teeth, studies show that they have shorter lifespans and they're more susceptible to dementia. So this is not just a dental issue, although that's major. It is a major health issue as well.
If you're just joining us, we are talking about the state and federal retreat from the use of fluoride. We are talking with Dr. Rutkowski from Jacksonville University. And if you would like to join our conversation, you have questions about dental health or a question for the doctor, you are welcome to join us. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email questions to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at FCC On Air. We have a call from Charles on the west side. Good morning, Charles. Go ahead.
Good morning, Ann. Good morning, Doctor. You know, every time I hear one of these anti-fluoride rants, I started thinking back to Dr. Strangelove with the Colonel Jack Ripper going on about losing our purity of essence because of fluoridization in the water. What are the antis citing as evidence that it's harmful to us?
Doctor, to Charles's question, and I do want to get to the specifics of what the harm that people believe is caused by fluoride or excess fluoride, but I think it does speak to just kind of how far we've come, that this idea of, fluoridated water being something, sinister or harmful was practically a punchline, in that film, and now is truly considered a threat. Can you talk about that evolution? And then also, let's please talk about what the perceived harms are.
Okay. Well, first off, it's bigger than a soundbite. And unfortunately, there is a whole segment of the world right now that wants to base everything on a soundbite. They don't want to delve down into it deeply. When we're talking about the harmful effects of fluoride and individuals that are anti-fluoride, they are usually citing studies that those studies have concluded that fluoride is harmful. But those studies are either being misinterpreted or they are flawed studies. When we're talking about the harmful effects of fluoride, which is why people don't want it to be in the water supply, we're talking about toxicology. And my PhD is in pharmacology toxicology. And whenever we talk about toxicology, we have to talk about dose. And just by example of dose, Tylenol, a half to 1 gram 4 times a day will control arthritic pain. It will control chronic headaches. It will control postoperative surgical pain. Yet if we take Tylenol and we give it a dose of 5 grams 4 times a day, it will be toxic and destroy the liver. But we're not talking about taking Tylenol off because people are understanding that there is a dose relationship there to the toxicity. Fluoride in the water at 0.7 parts per million is safe. Those studies that say that it's causing neurodegenerative disorders or lower IQs in the children, the offspring of women who drink fluoridated water or have fluoridated water available. It's not even specifying how much water they drink. Most of those studies, they come from China, India, or Iran, where the water supplies are not well controlled, and many of those water supplies have excessive amounts of fluoride, maybe 3.5 parts per million, as opposed to the 0.7 parts per million that we're suggesting. So, and also in looking at those studies where they're saying that it lowered the IQ of their offspring, in those studies, they did not consider what the IQs were of the mothers of those children. So the science is more than a soundbite. It goes deep. When you put a scientific project together, you have many people involved in it: epidemiologists, pharmacologists, biochemists, biostatisticians involved in it. Then once the data is collected, an independent biostatistician looks at that data, puts it together, analyzes it, and comes up with a result, a conclusion. There is no bias in a well-designed study. The studies that these individuals are citing to say that it's harmful, they're not looking at what is the dose that's given. Is it toxic or is it not? I can show you that just anything, too much water, drinking 1.5 liters of water every hour all day long will put you in a state of hyponatremia where you flush the sodium out of your body and it can kill you. But we're not talking about outlawing water. The extreme use of fluoride in water, drinking excessive amounts of water, would be a problem. But you would go into water toxicity before you would go into fluoride toxicity. So it's just not good science. It's based on sound bites. People like sound bites, particularly if the soundbite is anti-governmental or anti-establishment, then they go with that. So hopefully that sheds some light on your question there.
Yeah. I mean, we know that there is medical consensus. The American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, the ADA, the CDC, there's been this medical consensus, but there is, also the question of where to get unbiased information about a topic like this, one that has become so politicized, and also at a time when a lot of government agencies are increasingly politicized. And I think even just in researching for this segment, we found that to be a little bit confusing. You have agencies that at a time like the CDC, sang the praises of additive fluoride. But now you see agencies like the FDA coming out, and even some papers on the NIH website coming out talking about harms associated with fluoride, and they're perhaps referencing excess fluoride, but they're basically referring to it as additive fluoride, not necessarily specifying that it would be a toxic level of fluoride. But now saying that should not um, be added to water, or that supplemental fluoride, which is sometimes prescribed for people who live in water systems that are not fluoridated, that those prescriptions be banned, essentially, that people not be allowed to prescribe supplemental fluoride.
Um, good comments and good question. The best place to get your information on any health related or scientific matter is through the Web of Science. It's not doing a Google that may be AI enhanced, artificial intelligence enhanced with it, but going to the Web of Science. And the Web of Science only publishes peer reviewed papers. Now, even though those papers are peer reviewed, they have to be read and analyzed and critical thinking given to them. Because yes, bad papers do get published. Many good papers get published and some bad papers get published. And yes, science gets it wrong at times, no doubt about it. And that's why we have to go back and revisit it. So the current administration has instructed the CDC to no longer recommend the use of fluoride in water, although that is coming from a political individual and not a scientist. So go to the Web of Science. Don't just really do it Google. But when you do get that Web of Science paper, you have to read it critically. I am the editor of the Journal of Oral Implantology. I review papers. That's part of my job all day long. I'm reviewing papers and looking at them critically to make sure there's not a bias in there. And yes, things do need to be reevaluated. Let's take a look at and do new projects on the levels that we know are safe, 0.7 parts per million of fluoride in water. Let's construct some new research project. We're bringing all the experts together and looking and seeing, are we having any negative effects at these doses? But to overreact and just say, because we have found that there may be suspicion, okay, because there is suspicion, then let's do more studies. And that's why we need a good, solvent NIH led by good scientific clinicians, medically oriented individuals.
Dr. Rutkowski, I do want to come back to the Web of Science that you're recommending, and I have a couple questions about it, but I've got a couple of folks waiting on the phone, so I want to take these calls just if we can. Jeff in Arlington, go ahead, Jeff.
Hi, good morning, and thank you very much for addressing something that's become a biting issue. Sorry about that. I just wanted to ask a question about toothpaste. Toothpaste is advertised as having fluoride in it. How much fluoride is in toothpaste, and is it enough? I'll take my reply offline. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And I guess he means enough to, make up for the loss of fluoridated water, doctor.
Right. Well, that's an excellent question. It's a little bit of age dependent as to how much fluoride that you should get. If you have an infant and you're brushing their teeth when they start to come in at 6 months, that you should be using a drop of toothpaste that's about a seed, the size of a seed. And you should be trying to encourage that child to spit and not swallow. Okay. As the child gets older, like maybe age 2 to 3 and up, then they should be using one that's about the size of a pea. Okay. And again, spit, don't swallow. And once you get to be an adult, then you can put it on your toothbrush and brush. Now, the big thing is how long do you leave the toothpaste on there? Most people, studies have shown, brush their teeth for about 30 seconds. Well, that's inadequate. You should brush your teeth for 2 minutes. Obviously, those with fewer teeth, a young child doesn't have to brush quite as long, but an adult should brush for 2 minutes. 30 seconds per quadrant, upper right, upper left, lower right. 30 seconds each for a total of 2 minutes. If you do not swallow the toothpaste, there is no way you will get an excessive amount of fluoride, particularly as an adult. In a child, it is possible, but it's that the amount of fluoride that they get, even if they did swallow it, would not cause neurodegenerative disease, but rather just a hyperfluorosis where you get white blotches on the teeth.
Okay.
Once you're an adult, that's not possible, although we don't want you to swallow that fluoride.
Gotcha. We
Now,
also, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead.
I,
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I do want to take a call from Sally, unless you have something
Okay.
else to add. I'm going to take a call from Sally in Springfield. Good morning, Sally. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you. And thank you so much for this really informative discussion. Dosage really does seem to be the key. But my question is to take responsibility for ourselves since things are falling away from us. Can you recommend good free or low-cost dental clinics in Duval and St. Johns County?
Thanks, Sally.
Well, I'm actually in Huntsville, Alabama at this time, so I'm not an expert on what's in your area there, but I would think that yes, there are, and many of the local dentists would probably know that answer. So you could maybe contact any of the dentists there, and maybe try 2 or 3 of them and see if they know of it. We do not have an undergraduate dental program in Jacksonville University, so we don't have one of those clinics. We have one for orthodontics in Jacksonville that does reduce costs for orthodontic treatment. You can maybe also reach out to see if you can find a local dental society, and they would probably know the answer to that.
All right. I want to take a call from Lisa in St. Augustine, just briefly, Lisa.
Hi. Thank you for having me on the call and for this interesting conversation. My story is anecdotal, I guess, and I'm not against fluoride personally, but I did live for a brief time in a small town in Massachusetts, and my next door neighbor was a scientist at MIT who had some medical issues, went to the doctor and was told he had a thyroid condition. He did a little investigating because he didn't want to take the medicine. There was fluoride in this very small town's water supply, so he stopped drinking it. He drank spring water, and his symptoms went away. So I think my point is that maybe some, overall fluoride's fine and effective, but maybe dosing.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm just going to ask you, because we've only got a couple seconds left, Doctor, quickly respond to that.
Sure, yes. First off, I'm glad that his symptoms improved. And in anything in medicine, there are outliers, and we ought to always consider when somebody has a disease state to look at everything. And if changing the water, now it may have been the fluoride, but there may have been other minerals in that water that may have been causing it. So I don't want to make a direct relationship there. But anytime there's a medical condition, the clinician must look at all things and not be closed-minded to anything.
All right. We're going to have to leave it there. We should say our producer says that community health outreach does provide free dental services. Dr. James Rutkowski, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Up next, a 25-year celebration of the St. Johns River Keeper.
Volunteers in Medicine Jacksonville is dedicated to helping the working uninsured stay on top of their health. High blood pressure is a silent killer. A healthy reading is under 120/80. Learn more at vimjax.org. Museum of Science and History's new exhibition, Mosh Archives, The Story of Us and You, steps you into a treasure trove of memories, now through August 31st. Tickets and information at themosh.org.
New York City has lost control of its jails. In May, a federal judge ruled that the city's jails, including Rikers Island, will now be run by a manager who reports directly to the court.
The city, over the past decade, at just about every turn, has failed to implement reforms, and the violence in the meantime has actually worsened.
The federal takeover of Rikers Island. That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
When it comes to how well we will age, our genes are really just one factor to consider.
I think it's a common miscue that we are going to follow suit with our parents, and it turns out that's really not true.
The newest research on how to age well and be healthy into your 80s and beyond. That's next time on Think.
Tonight at 7 on WJCT News 89.9.
Clean electricity, advanced batteries, and electric vehicles. Republicans are taking aim at Biden-era tax credits meant to boost these industries. It's part of their big domestic policy bill currently in the Senate. If they do cut these supports, what could that mean for the country's efforts to decarbonize and build an advanced manufacturing sector? The GOP's changes to the clean energy economy. That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. The St. John's River Keeper celebrates 25 years of environmental stewardship with an approach that will appeal to some craft beer lovers. Here to tell us what's on tap is Dryden Mills. She is Community Engagement Specialist with the St. John's River Keeper. Good morning, Dryden.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. We're also joined by Ray Whaley. He is co-owner of Second Bay Brewing in Fruit Cove. Good morning, Ray.
Good morning.
Nice to have you both. First of all, I should say congrats on the 25. I know you're relatively new to Riverkeeper, but the organization is celebrating its 25th anniversary. How have things changed over that time for the organization in terms of challenges, accomplishments that it has marked?
Absolutely. So like you said, Riverkeeper has been around for about 25 years. And throughout that time, we've tried to serve as an independent voice for the St. John's River. We've been the leading voice on many of the issues facing the river throughout that time, like water withdrawals, algae blooms, currently things like protecting our river grasses. So things have changed. The river still needs some help. We're trying to keep an eye on that, protect the river for the future and for 25 more years to come. But mostly the issues, they stay the same. We continue to work on them, make a dent on them there, but really just protecting the river has been our main focus.
And this is a fun focus that you all are doing to recognize the organization, also do some fundraising at the same time. But it sort of is trying to emphasize the importance of clean water in making good beer.
Yes, absolutely. So really the focus of our organization is safe, clean water for everyone in the St. John's River. And we've been supported by so many local businesses throughout our time, including craft breweries like Second Bay, what Ray's here for. And clean water is important in making beer. So we thought that having this celebration where we're celebrating our 25th anniversary, it would be a really good tie-in to celebrate all these breweries in our area too.
Yeah, and Ray, you are just one of a bunch that are participating, but it's kind of cool. It's all breweries in the watershed of the St. John's River, and so there's a kind of a big footprint. But what is it that you're planning, and why did you decide to participate?
Well, as a as a Florida native, St. John's River has always been part of my lifestyle, and so in getting into brewing, a lot of people don't realize that all the breweries utilize the water from the Floridan aquifer, of which the St. John's River helps to recharge. So all the breweries that are part of this watershed are making the beer from the same water source. And we want to make sure that water source is protected and clean for everybody.
Yeah. And so part of what participating breweries are doing is a lot of them are designating a beer to kind of honor that milestone, and then also donate some portion of proceeds from the sale of that beer. So is that kind of what you're planning, and what beer is on tap?
So for our location, we have what's called the Honey Bunny. That is an infused beer with Tupelo honey from the Panhandle of Florida. And for that, we are more than happy to showcase that beer for everybody to come by and drink. But we like to stress that for all the breweries that are participating, it's not just maybe a monetary donation. It's maybe volunteering your time, help out with a cleanup, or just get engagement with the community, let other people know about what the St. Johns River Keeper is all about.
Yeah, it's an interesting partnership. It does seem like there's always been this kind of good cohesion between Riverkeeper and local breweries. So this one actually involves, people can kind of track their progress.
Yes.
There are, as I said, a whole region of participating breweries. But if you go to them, you can actually, I think there's like either an app or you can kind of
Yeah.
download a passport.
So let me tell you how it works. So we have more than 25 breweries and a couple of other businesses on our passport. If you go to 25taps.com, that's 25taps.com, you can register for the passport either as yourself or as a team, and you'll be able to see all of the participating businesses. It'll have a little blurb about them and how they're supporting us. Like you said, a lot of them are designating $1 from a specific tap. And you'll be able to either scan a QR code on the wall at the brewery or on the 25 Taps website. You can geolocate yourself there, or you can just take a selfie at the brewery. And that can get verified. So we've tried to make it as easy and seamless as possible. But each time you go to a brewery and you check in, you get points. And as you start to rack up points, you can get prizes. So 3 breweries get you a prize, 5 breweries get you another prize, and so on. The goal is 25, but the campaign does only go from June 1st to July 31st. So you've got 2 months. If anybody's up to the task,
That's a lot.
give it a
You
try.
really have to be on the stick. to
Yeah,
get-
but in addition to the prizes, we're also, each time you check into a brewery, you get entered in a drawing that we're doing at our end of campaign celebration at Intuition Ale Works. It's on August 3rd, and we'll be drawing from all of the people who have participated, and the grand prize is your choice of either a 3-hour eco tour or a half-day fishing charter provided really generously from Tannic Water Adventures. So really excited to offer that up.
And we should say, Ray, I mean, your passion for the St. Johns River included a paddle yourself. You did the entire 310 miles of the St. Johns River, and you wrote a book called Journey of a River Walker about it.
That's correct.
Yeah, and so it is close to your heart. Are you going to be going to other breweries, or are you going to stick close to home?
Well, I mean, I kind of like to stay close to home, but I will say that the breweries are taking place in this campaign. They all have great beer, and
Yeah.
I have sampled and had many beers at other breweries. So no matter where you go, you're going to get great beer.
All right. Well, it runs from June 1st to July 31st. Dryden Mills, Ray Whaley, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
All right. And thank you for listening. That's our program. If you have comments or suggestions, you could send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. Join us tomorrow when we ask diversity educator Dr. Tammy Hodo ahead of the city's Juneteenth celebration about why this year's observance is different. I'm Ann Schindler.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Museum of Science and History's new exhibition, Mosh Archives, The Story of Us and You, steps you into a treasure trove of memories, now through August 31st. Tickets and information at themosh.org.
This is WJCT News.